Hello, good day, Sir Howard here. Welcome to our third part of talking about the validity of psychological test. Kung maalala ninyo, in the previous episodes, I discussed with you the three categories of finding the validity of a psychological test. Meron tayong construct identification procedures, meron tayong criterion prediction procedures, and for today, we are going to talk about content description procedures. Bago ko i-discuss ng malaliman yung number 3, ipaalala ko lang ulit sa inyo, how would you know which of the following are you going to choose in establishing the validity of your test? Ang sagot dyan, depende kung anong expression of validity yung gusto mong i-establish sa iyong psychological test. If you remember our discussion on the definition of validity, tatlo ang expressions ng validity: the ability of your test to measure what it claims to measure. Number two would be the ability of your test to predict future thinking and behavior of the test takers. And number three, the ability of your test to make the test takers take the test seriously. So yun yung tatlong expressions of validity. Now, the first two procedures dito sa slide ninyo, yung first two categories, for the first one, construct identification procedures, ano ang tinatanong yan? Is your test measuring what it claims to measure? So if you want to answer that question, then you choose any one of the following methods. Kung gusto mo naman malaman kung yung test mo may kakayanan to predict future thinking and behavior, then you just choose whether you are going to use predictive or concurrent validity. So yung pag-uusapan natin ngayon, the third category of finding test validity, it's called content description procedures. There are only two procedures here, content validity and face validity. Ano ang tanong na sinasagot natin dito? The question that we want to answer in using these procedures would be, will my participants take the test seriously, or will this test motivate them to take the test seriously? Napakahalaga na masigurado natin na yung ating participants o yung ating test takers, would be taking our test seriously, because dito manggagaling yung ating raw score. So you can only imagine if your participants or the test takers don't take the test seriously, this will put into question the validity of the scores na makukuha mo from your psychological test, kasi nga hindi nila sineryoso. So kung hindi nila sineryoso yung test, questionable ngayon kung tama ba yung raw score na makukuha mo, at yung raw score na makukuha mo, questionable yan para gamitin mo yan to assess, to make sense, to interpret the raw score. So I hope you can see the connection how your participants, or how important it is for your test takers to take the test seriously. Now, the first thing you need to know about content description procedures is ito ang pinakasimpleng paraan sa pag-validate ng test. Kaya maraming mga estudyante sa college level, ito kaagad yung procedure na pinipili in establishing the validity of their test. Kasi dito, ito ang pinakamadali na procedure. Why? Why are this set of procedures the easiest to do? Because there is no longer need for any administration of the test. Kung ikukumpara mo doon sa dalawang naunang procedures, construct identification procedures and criterion prediction procedures, kinakailangan mo talaga i-administer yon sa mga test takers, kinakailangan mo ng mga malulupit na mga statistical method for you to establish test validity. But for these procedures, yan man ay face validity or content validity, hindi mo na siya kinakailangan i-administer. So that's the reason why this is the simplest way of validating a test. Now, a good question to ask is, kung hindi natin ina-administer yung psychological test, what is our basis for saying that the test is valid or not valid? Kasi doon sa previous two categories of establishing test validity, yung basis natin doon would be the numbers, specifically the correlation coefficient, or in the case of factor analysis, yung mga sophisticated na mga correlational values, 'di ba? So the basis for the previous methods are always numerical. So kung hindi natin ina-administer ito, ibig sabihin wala tayong mga raw scores, at kung wala tayong mga raw scores, then ano ngayon ang nagiging basis natin for saying whether a test is valid or not? Ito yung tinatawag nating subjective judgment. Depende ngayon yan sa tingin natin. Kaya nga sinasabi ko, this is the easiest validity procedure na pwedeng gawin kasi ginagamit mo lang yung judgment mo para masabi mo kung yung test ba is valid or not. Definitely, mas madaling gumamit ng subjective judgment compared to pag-aralan mo pa kung papaano mag-run ng mga statistical method that we have been discussing for the past episodes. Pero, isang malaking pero, dahil ito ang pinaka madali, no? Ito rin yung pinaka mababaw na test validity that a test constructor or a test developer can use. Kaya naman yung mga professional test developers, hindi ganun kataas ang tingin nila sa face validity. Usually talaga, if you are a legitimate test developer, you would really prefer to establish the validity of your test using, number one, construct identification procedures or criterion prediction procedures. Kung mag-establish man ng content description procedures, hinuhuli nila yung pag-establish dyan. Inuuna muna nila yung first two procedures before this one. Okay? Now, let's dig deeper this content description procedures. Content validity man yan or face validity, again, we are answering this question, will participants or test takers take the test seriously? Will it motivate them to take the test? Nasaan ba nakasalalay yung pagseryoso sa isang psychological test ng mga test takers? Ang susi dyan ay nakasalalay sa presentability of a test. Presentable ba yung test o hindi? If the test is highly presentable, then more likely, participants will be taking the test seriously. Pero kung hindi presentable ang test, malamang sa malamang, hindi nila seseryosohin yan. Paano mo ba malalaman kung presentable ba yung psychological test? Yan ngayon yung pag-aaralan natin while we discuss the following two methods under content description procedures. Dalawa lang naman yan, content validity or face validity. Unahin natin yung pag-aaral ng content validity. Basically, the question we want to answer in content validity, simple, do the items belong to the test or not? Sa Tagalog, dapat lang ba na yung mga items na pinipresenta mo sa test na yan ay naroon nga sa test? Keyword belong. Do the items in the test being presented to the test takers, do they really belong in the psychological test that you are administering? Kung baga parang ganitong ginagawa natin sa content validity. Imagine niyo itong template yung test. Tapos yung mga shape na ito, yun yung mga items. So in content validity, what we do here is we check whether itong item ba na ito ay tugma, kasya ba, appropriate ba, given the nature of the test. So mukhang itong cube na ito, hindi yata siya kakasya dito sa bilog. So mukhang mababa ang content validity ng item na yan. Of course, this is only an analogy. No? Mamaya as we go along, I am going to show to you how exactly this is done in the context of real psychological test. Isa pang analogy kung paano ginagawa ang content validity. Imagine niyo the DLSU Psychology Department. Okay? Kung hahanapan natin ng content validity yung psych department ng DLSU, if we are going to treat the department as a psychological test at hahanapin natin ng content validity, how are we going to do it? Uunahin muna natin i-define kung ano bang ibig sabihin ng DLSU Psychology Department. Ano ba itong department na ito? You simply go to the website of De La Salle University, Manila and search for the College of Liberal Arts, and then you search for the Psychology Department. In the website, merong sinasabi ang La Salle kung ano ba ang definition ng Psychology Department sa DLSU. A recognized union by DLSU that contains highly qualified professionals that possess competent and above average qualifications in educational attainment, teaching, research, and consultation in all fields of the psychological discipline. Again, hindi ko lang inimbento ito, no? Ito ang description ng department in the website of DLSU Manila. So again, if we are going to treat the department as a psychological test and run a content validity on this, paano natin ito gagawin? I-check natin kung yung laman ba from the term itself, content or contain. Yung laman ba ng psychology department na ito is appropriate? Is it consistent or is it do the people in this department belong to the psychology department given the description given here on the slide? So definitely ang laman ng psychology department, mga tao, mga professor, mga faculty members. So kung magko-content validity tayo ng faculty members, titignan lang natin kung bawat miyembro ba ng psych department is in line, is appropriate given the description of what psychology department is in De La Salle University, Manila. Sa Tagalog, karapat-dapat ba na yung mga professor currently na nasa loob ng departamento, karapat-dapat ba sila na naroon nga sa DLSU Psychology Department? So what do we do? Randomly, pipili tayo ng mga faculty members and then iisa-isahin natin sila na i-compare doon sa definition of the psychology department. Again, if we are going to put into bullet forms those descriptions na nakita natin dito, ganito ang itsura niyan. Sino daw ang mga karapat-dapat sa psych department ng DLSU Manila? Highly qualified professional, competent teacher, competent researcher, competent consultant, above average in educational attainment. So iisa-isahin ngayon natin yung mga tao in the psychology department, specifically the faculty members, at titignan natin kung namimit ba nila ang lahat ng yan. If the answer is yes, let's say a faculty member meets all this, then that faculty member has content validity. Ibig sabihin, karapat-dapat lang na siya ay naroon sa loob ng DLSU Psychology Department. On the other hand, kapag meron kang faculty member na nakita na mukhang nagkulang doon sa mga sinasabi dito, as in na fall short siya, hindi niya yon na-meet kahit isa lang dyan, then that means that faculty member ay walang content validity. Hindi siya karapat-dapat doon sa loob ng departamento, so you need to modify the faculty or tanggalin yung faculty na yon. Kasi nga, wala siyang content validity based on who should be inside the DLSU Psychology Department. So, ganun, no? Ganun ang pinaka-logic ng content validity, no? Now, ito ngayon yung maganda nating pag-usapan. How do you know if items are fit to be in a psychological test? Paano mo malalaman in the context of test development kung bagay ba yung mga items, kung bagay ba yung mga items sa isang psychological test? Bigyan ko kayo ng specific example. Let's say we are developing a scale entitled the fear scale. Definitely, pangalan pa lang we know what is the construct of the scale. Ang construct dito is fear. Your tendency to feel fearfulness. So, yun ang minimeasure ng scale na ito. So, what do we do if we are going to run a content validity of this psychological test? Re-reviewin natin yung conceptual definition of fear. This is a very important term. Anong ibig sabihin ng conceptual definition of fear? Ito yung definition ng construct na ginamit ng mga test developers in forming the items of this test. Remember, in test development, isa yan sa mga unang steps na ginagawa before you construct your own psychological test. I-define mo muna conceptually kung anong ibig sabihin ng construct mo. So you read the different literature on fear. Definitely maraming version, maraming definition ng fear kang ma-encounter. As a test developer, what you do is you combine all these definitions and then you come up with your own version of the definition of fear. Mahalaga yan kasi yung definition of fear na mabubuo mo, that will be the basis of the items that you are going to construct in relation to the test that you are developing. So halimbawa, balikan natin yung conceptual definition of fear na ginamit ng mga authors in this scale. So sabihin natin nagbasa sila ng 100 articles on fear and ang ending, this is the way they defined fear in their scale. Fear is an emotion caused by real or imagined threat that can potentially result to danger, humiliation, and pain. Again, itong definition na ito, sinong gumawa nito? Yung author nung test na ginagawa. Yan yung kanyang conceptual definition of fear. Therefore, lahat ng items na dinevelop ng mga authors, ito ang naging basihan. So all items in this fear scale, the basis of these items came from this conceptual definition of fear. Ngayong alam na natin yung conceptual definition ng fear, dito na ngayon tatakbo talaga yung content validity. Now we are going to compare each items in the test to the conceptual definition that was made by the authors. Dito na ngayon tayo magde-decide kung swak nga ba, appropriate nga ba, tugma nga ba yung mga items doon sa conceptual definition of fear. So again, ano ang conceptual definition natin? The one in the red box. That's the way the authors defined what fear is. So kung magko-content validity na tayo, iisa-isahin natin ngayon yung mga items in this test. Let's pick item number 1. Sabi dito, I feel afraid every time I think of myself undergoing a strenuous physical activity. We are now going to compare item 1 doon sa conceptual definition ng fear. Etong item ba na ito ay pasok sa definition ng fear na sinet ng authors? If the answer is yes, which I think the answer is yes, you let go of number 1, meron niyang content validity. Now you move on to the next item. I feel cold when I find my physical safety is threatened. O ikumpara mo na naman yung item number 2 doon sa conceptual definition of fear, pasok ba o hindi? I think pasok naman. So you leave number 2, meron na yung content validity, you move on to number 3. I get extremely uneasy when I know I am not going to do things well in front of many people. Ikumpara mo na naman yung number 3 sa conceptual definition. Kung ang sagot mo tugma naman sa conceptual definition, leave number 3 alone, meron na yung content validity. Number 4, I get excited when I look forward to meeting a friend I want to spend time with. Mukhang may problema. No? I get excited when I look forward to meeting a friend I want to spend time with. Mukhang wala naman kasing idea of excitement in the conceptual definition of fear. Wala namang binabanggit yung mga author doon sa conceptual definition na kasama yung excitement sa component ng fear. So ano mangyayari? Yung number 4 becomes a questionable item in terms of content validity. Ang gagawin ngayon ng test developer dyan is pwede niyang i-modify yung item or dahil wala siyang content validity, tatanggalin mo na lang yung item na yan. Ganun lang ang mag-content validity. Again, if you notice, ano lang ang ginamit mo to decide the validity of the items? Your subjective judgment. Okay? Kaya nga sabi ko nga kanina, ito ang pinakamabilis na paraan in establishing the validity of a test. Now, what if the test is an objective test? Kasi yung kaninang example natin on fear, ano yan personality test yan Paano kung yung test mo merong tama o maling sagot? Let's say, it's an achievement test or an aptitude test. Paano natin hinahanapan ito ng content validity? Dito na mahalaga yung tinatawag nating table of specifications. For those of you not familiar with table of specifications, ito yung table wherein tinitignan natin kung ano ba yung mga topics na included sa isang exam. Okay? And then, tinitignan natin kung ano ang relationship, kung tugma ba yung mga items nung test na yon given the topics that are covered in the exam. So for example, here on the screen na nakikita ninyo, meron tayong dito mga topics A, B, C, and D. Ito yung mga topics na kino-cover ng isang, let's say, psychological test, psychological achievement test. 4 na topics. Ang ginagawa ng table of specifications, it tells us ilang items meron under topic A, ilang items meron ang topic B. Pero hindi pa kasi ito masyadong detailed na table of specifications, but in more comprehensive table of specifications, dapat nakasulat mismo yung mga items dito. Kung ano yung mga tanong sa test na yon, dapat nakasulat yan under this one. So imagine nyo na lang yung mga numbers na yan, mga items mismo na nakasulat. So what we do in content validity is, nagde-decide tayo kung yung isang item ba, siya ba ay karapat-rapat na naroon given topic A. So for example, yung topic A natin, sabihin natin Industrial Organizational Psychology. O, tapos basahin mo yung item number 1. Given what you can read on item number 1, sa tingin mo, yung item ba na yon ay item talaga pang IO Psychology? Yung item 2, pang IO Psychology nga ba yan? Yung item 3, pang IO Psychology nga ba yan? So on and so forth. Ganun din sa topics B, C, and D. Sabihin natin yung topic B is Clinical Psychology. O, bunot ka ng isang item doon sa psychological test. Do you think this item deserves to be under clinical psychology? So, ganun lang. No? Chine-check mo lang kung tugma ba yung item doon sa coverage ng psychological test na ginagawa natin o dinedevelop natin. So, sinisigurado natin that all items in that particular test must be in line with what the test is covering. Yan lang yung iniiwasan natin, no, in doing this procedure. We don't like items that are inconsistent or that does not match. We don't like items that don't match the coverage that the test is covering. Okay? Now, another way or another version of doing a content validity would be in terms of the learning objective. Halimbawa, yung learning objective nung test is this one. Gusto mong i-measure kung nahihit ba yung isang learning objective. Yung mga teachers dito, I'm sure you get what I mean, no? Oh, given this learning objective, and given this item number 1, again, nakasulat dito yung item number 1. Imagine nyo lang, ito yung item number 1, no? Itong item number 1 ba na ito, tama ba na item para ma-measure natin yung learning objective na yan? Ganun din sa item number 2. Yung item number 2 na ito, whatever that item is this item match, or does this item matches the learning objective that we want to measure? The same thing with item number 3. So that's another way how to do content validity. Now, you might ask, how is this connected to motivation? Remember, ang content description procedures, ang pinoproblema natin dito, seseryosohin ba o mamamotivate ba ang mga test takers to take the test? So, how is this connected to the motivation of the test takers? Ang sagot dyan, lalong-lalo na sa objective test, nawawalan kasi ng motivation yung mga test takers kapag nasa-sense nila that the items that are being asked inside the test are not the items that they are expecting. Lalong-lalo na, for example, yung mga exams o yung mga board exams. Bago mag-board exam ang mga test takers, they are given pointers for review. Binibigyan sila ng mga ideas kung ano yung mga topics na dapat nilang aralin. Imagine if you are the test taker and then you sense that there are a lot of items in the test that are not in connection with the topic na binigay sa'yo, na sinabi sa'yo yung aralin mo, mafe-feel mo na parang nadaya ka. Mafe-feel mo na parang unfair. Why are there a lot of items in the test that are not even in the coverage given to us? Kapag naramdaman ng mga test takers yan, babagsak ang motivation nila while they are taking the test. Magpapanik yung iba dyan. No, na bakit ganito yung mga items? No, parang hindi ko to inaral. Bakit parang hindi naman ito tugma sa pointers for review na binigay sa amin? And that is a very powerful demotivator for the test takers to experience. Yan yung connection ng content description or content validity sa motivation ng mga test takers. Now, before we leave content validity, another good question, who can establish content validity? Yung mga procedures na ginawa natin kanina, we compare the items with the conceptual definition, We compare the items according to the coverage or the learning objective. Pwedeng gawin yan ng mga authors of the test. Ang problema lang kung ang mismong author ang gagawa ng content validity, there is always a tendency that they will be biased. Siyempre, as much as possible, bilang author ng mga items na yan, ayaw mong merong mawawala. 'Di ba? Ayaw mong merong mabubura kasi parang mga babies mo yan yung mga items mo, no? So, there is a tendency that you might be biased. So, the solution to this problem is pwedeng humanap ka ng external evaluator na mag-e-establish ng content validity ng iyong test. Or number two, para maiwasan din natin ito, yung number one, gumagamit tayo ng subject matter experts. So this time, hindi na yung authors yung mag-content validate, pero hahanap tayo ng mga subject matter experts to content validate our test. Halimbawa, gumagawa tayo ng items for the psychology board exam. So, hahanap tayo ng mga big-time psychologist, mga seasoned psychologist. Sila ngayon ang magde-decide kung karapat-dapat ba yung mga items mo doon sa test na dinedevelop mo. So, those are the two possible people to establish content validity of the test. Actually, in some textbooks, kung magbabasa kayo ng content validity, may mga developments in the procedure where kaya na nilang gawing numerical or more objective yung content validity. Originally, wala kasing mga formula yan Sabi ko nga kanina, they are just using subjective judgment. But again, in the development of the procedures, merong mga psychometricians or test developers came up with a way on how to make the decisions in content validity more objective. So, gumagamit na sila ng mga ganyang formula, no? Oo. So, if you're going to analyze the formula, magigets nyo naman yung logic. Basically, ang sinasabi lang dito, gumagamit tayo ng multiple subject matter expert. So, going back here, ayan. 'Di ba ang nag-establish ng content validity, subject matter experts, you can get more than one subject matter expert. Dito nga, parang ang ginamit 3 or 4, 'di ba? So, marami magko-content validate nung items mo doon sa test, and then depending kung ilang subject matter experts ang nagsabi na valid itong item na ito, that will determine the overall content validity of that item by applying this formula. Okay, so ganyan, no? Ganyan yung pag-establish natin ng content validity. Now, let's move on to face validity. Ang pinoproblema naman natin dito is the overall presentation or the physical appearance of the test. Kaya nga, based on the definition of face validity, ito yung isa sa mga pinaka-shallow, pinaka-mababaw na definition of test validity. Although shallow or mababaw, mahalaga pa rin na pag-usapan natin. Diba? So, ang pinoproblema natin sa face validity from the term itself, face, presentable ba, maganda ba tignan yung test na dinedevelop mo? The question is, why should we even care kung yung test mo ba ay maganda tignan o maganda sa paningin? Very important because, again, this will affect how serious test takers will be in taking the test. Kapag ang test mo kasi maganda tignan, maganda sa paningin, maganda ang presentation, malamang sa malamang, your test takers will take the test seriously. Kasi ang psyche ng tao, ang pag-iisip natin, whether or not we are going to take something seriously, depende rin yan sa itsura. For example, yung pagkain, di ba? Kung ano ang kakainin mo, depende yan sa presentation ng pagkain. So, given these pictures, for example, mukhang mas maraming kakain ng hamburger sa kanan kumpara sa hindi ko nga alam kung ano yung pagkain sa kaliwa. Now, for all you know, baka mas masarap naman talaga yung pagkain sa kaliwa. Baka mas masustansya yung pagkain sa kaliwa. But how come you would predict that people would still prefer the hamburger over the other food? The answer, the hamburger has good presentation. Kitang-kita nyo naman kasi yung symmetry ng hamburger. Pantay na pantay. Okay, burger muna, yung tinapay muna, and then the patty, and then yung mga vegetable, and then burger ulit, and then Andun na naman yung pati, 'di ba? Maganda tignan, merong sistema yung pagkakapresent. Tapos yung background niya nakakaapekto rin. Parang yung background niya galing sa oven, mainit-init pa, masarap kainin habang may kape. Compared to the other food, pati yung background hindi mo maintindihan, parang hindi malinis kung saan man nanggaling yan. No? So natatakot ka na baka magkasakit ka kapag kinain mo yan. So again, why are we preferring the food on the right? Because it has face validity. Maganda ang kanyang presentation. Kahit nga sa mga teachers diba? For the students listening to me, you get my point here. Whether or not you are going to take the subject seriously depends on the presentation of the teacher. As in, the physical presentation of the teacher. Kung ano ang itsura ng teacher mo, may epekto yon kung seseryosohin mo ba yung subject o hindi. For example, may pumasok sa classroom. Teacher daw siya ng theories of personality. Tapos ganito ang itsura. Less likely mong seseryosohin yan compared to a teacher who is presented this way. Yung pangalawang teacher kasi mas mukhang kapanipaniwala, mas mukha siyang expert sa theories of personality. Meron siyang presentation. 'Di ba? Parang mas i-absorb mo yung mga sasabihin ng teacher sa kanan kumpara doon sa teacher sa kaliwa. Now again, we are not judging these people. We are not saying whether these people are good or bad, but we should accept the fact that presentation matters in taking things or people seriously. And in this case, mukhang mas maganda ang presentation ng teacher sa kanan kumpara sa kaliwa. Okay, so let's now talk about the presentability of psychological test in the language of face validity. Ano bang ibig sabihin kapag yung test mo presentable sa lengguwahe ng face validity? Una, dapat syempre yung test mo mukhang test. Kapag nakita ng test takers that they are going to take a test, dapat paniwalang-paniwala sila, kumbinsido sila that what they are going to take is indeed a standardized psychological test. At meron naman tayong idea kung ano ang itsura ng isang psychological test. Diba? Usually, ganyan yan. No? Puting papel, magsusulat ka muna ng mga details doon sa taas, tapos merong mga items yan, may mga bilog, yan yung i-shade mo. So, kapag binigay mo yung papel na yan sa kanila, and they say, or they immediately know that they are going to take a psychological test, then merong face validity yung test mo. Now, on the other hand, kapag binigyan mo sila ng papel, ng answer sheet, tapos hindi nila gets kung ano ba yung binigay mo sa kanila, kung scratch paper ba yun, or isang magazine, o isang babasahin lang nila, no? Ibig sabihin, walang face validity yung test mo kasi hindi pa nila na-sense, hindi pa nila na-perceive na test pala yung kanilang hinahawakan. So, mababa ang face validity ng test mo kapag ganun. Number 2, dapat yung test mo is age appropriate. It matters how you will present your test depending kung ang kukuha ba ng test mo is kids or adults. Dapat age appropriate. The presentation of your psychological test must also depend on who or what age. Anong age ba kukuha o anong age ba ng mga test takers mo? For example, kung alam mo na yung test mo ay kukunin ng mga bata, your test is made for kids, di ba? Dapat yung language mo na ginagamit doon sa test, yung mga tanong, kung verbal test man yan, must be in line with the comprehension level of kids. Pangbata din dapat yung mga sentence dyan para maintindihan ng mga bata. Right? Kung pang-adults naman, adults ang kukuha ng test mo, dapat yung sentence construction mo is in the level of adults. Imagine niyo na lang, balik na rin nyo. Kids ang kukuha ng test, pero yung sentence construction mo pang-adults. Or vice versa. Yung test mo pang-adults, but your sentence construction is for kids. Definitely mawawala ng gana kumuha ng test yung mga test takers mo. Letter B, the design of the test also matters. Kung paano mo i-presenta o kung ano ang makikita ng mga test takers sa test mo also matters. Iba ang disenyo ng test kapag mga bata ang kukuha to maintain their attention. Iba rin naman ang disenyo ng test kapag adults. Like for example, ang Wechsler. Ang Wechsler, kapag yung test nila pambata, also known as the WISC, Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, they use bright colors. Kasi ang mga kids, by nature, they are attracted to bright colors. So, masaya para sa kanila yung experience sa kumukuha sila ng isang test and they see different kiddie colors. Pero wag mong gagawin yan kapag yung test takers mo adults, such as in WAIS, the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale. Definitely, kung ang kukuha ng test mo mga adults, dapat yung mga kulay dyan is very professional looking, very formal, such as dark shades. And that's what Wechsler is doing here. Kaya iba ang itsura ng WISC versus sa WAIS. Okay? So ito pa, yung some other examples of how you need to present your psychological test. Di ba? Parang ang sarap-sarap kumuha, ang sarap-sarap tignan ng psychological test mo kasi meron siyang face validity. Nakakakumbinsi na yung mga test takers, pag nakita nila ito, iisipin nila na, uy, this is something serious. This is legitimate. Kasi maganda ang itsura, maganda ang presentation ng iyong psychological test. Okay? And of course, number 3, wag natin kakalimutan, although mukhang maliit na bagay, pero kung iisipin mo, malaking bagay ang grammatical errors. 'Di ba? Sisiguraduhin mo, before you release your psychological test to the market, marami kang editions o marami kang editors na kinukuha. Kasi isa sa mga turn off ng mga test takers whenever they're taking a standardized psychological test is when they see grammatical errors. Kasi ang dating yan, kapag kumukuha ka ng test na maraming grammatical errors, iisipin mo, parang minadali yung test. 'Di ba? Parang hindi masyadong pinag-isipan yung test. Parang magdududa ka ngayon if this test is really legitimate or gawa-gawa lang nito o gawa-gawa lang ito ng kung sino mang walang magawa sa buhay. 'Di ba? Pero kung tama ang grammar mo, tama ang sentence construction mo, even the punctuation marks, everything is perfect because you carefully edited all the items, then malaking ano yan, no? Malaking factor yan for the test takers to take your test seriously. So ang lesson dito, one of the final stages na gagawin ng isang test developer before releasing the test to the market, kumuha ng editor na mag-check ng mga grammars ng mga items. So there you go. Natapos na rin natin yung discussion natin sa establishing validity of psychological tests. Again, there are 3 expressions of test validity. Yan yung magde-determine kung ano ang procedure na gagamitin mo. Okay? Depende what kind of validity would you like to establish in your test. Would you like to establish construct identification in your test? Would you like to establish criterion prediction in your test? Would you like to establish content description in your test? Ang tanong, given the following categories of procedure, dapat ba lahat yan gawin mo? Well, guess what? In big time tests, yung talagang mga tests na mataas ang presyo, one of the reasons why a psychological test would be high in value, kung bakit mahal ang presyo, kasi lahat ng klase ng validity meron sila. Merong construct identification yung test na yon. Yung test na yon is valid in terms of criterion prediction, valid din siya in terms of content description. So ideally speaking, lahat naman talaga yan dapat ini-establish. Pero isang specific procedure lang per category. Which means, for example, in construct identification procedures, hindi naman kinakailangan lahat yan gamitin mo. Isa lang from number 1, pwede na. Isa lang from number 2, pwede na. Isa lang from number 3, pwede na. Okay? So, yun ang advantage nun. Kapag na-establish mo na yung test mo, lahat yan meron, that could be one good reason why your test will be highly valuable. So, I hope I was able to help you to further understand what test validity means. If you have any questions about test validity, bigla kang may naisip na tanong, no, na gusto mong itanong sa akin, then please don't hesitate to post a message in the comment section and I'm going to do my best to answer those questions. Salamat sa panonood. Until next time here in our Libreng sit-in in Psychometrics. Thank you and God bless.